questions 7 through 9. All right, but the very first thing that I want to go over is kind of a refresher on our function notation and what I'm expecting you to do based on that notation. So, very first thing, if you see f plus g of x, this means that you're going to do f of x plus g of x. All right, so something very important that I really need you to get in the habit of doing. Make sure that whenever you're doing these, each function goes into its own parentheses. All right, so next one is f minus g of x. Again, that's f of x minus g of x. And again, making sure that each function goes into its own parentheses. You never know when you're going to potentially need to distribute that negative. All right, next notation is multiplication, so we get f g of x. This means that you're going to take f of x and multiply it to g of x. Again, make sure that you are using parentheses. Next, you'll see f slash g of x. This means that you're going to divide f of x divided by g of x. Again, just to be safe, get in the habit of putting parentheses. All right, now the most important one that we need to really work on is f of g of x. This means that you're going to take g of x and plug it into f. Okay, so if I were to be looking at this, it means that, well, sorry, if you're using a number, say I gave you f of g of 12, right? That means that first you're going to find g of 12. We're going to say that it's 4, just for random numbers. And you're going to use that 4 to then solve function f for 4. And you're going to get whatever your answer is. Okay, I suggest you doing these separately, not trying to plug in g and then plug in a number. Okay, doing it separate really allows you to do it step by step and eliminates a lot of confusion. Now, this works for anything, right? If I had h of g of x, again, this just means that I'm taking g and I'm plugging it into h. Okay, and I actually could even do this for f of g of h of x. I know this looks very complicated, but it means that you're going to take h and plug it into g. Whatever you get for g, you plug into f. Okay, you just work your way back out. Now, let's go over some problems. Okay, so we have f plus g. So I know I'm going to take f, which is 6x, and plus g, which is x squared minus 1. I know that my parentheses are not affected by a plus sign, so I'm going to get 6x plus x squared minus 1. But when I go to write my final answer, I know I'm going to put it in descending order, so I get x squared plus 6x minus 1. All right, for b, I'm dividing. So I have g on top, so I get x squared minus 1 divided by the square root of x minus 2. Now, if we know anything about fractions, we know that we cannot have a square root in the denominator. So to get rid of the square root, I know I'm going to multiply the top and the bottom by square root of x minus 2. So all this does is this square root eliminates that square root so that I get x minus 2 on the bottom. And on the top, I keep x squared minus 1 square root of x minus 2. Okay, I only did that because I know I cannot have a square root in the denominator. I like to show you the correct way to do everything. So we know our answer is just going to be, oh, something is going on with my pen. It's going to be x squared minus 2, x squared minus 1 in parentheses, square root of x minus 2 all over x minus 2. Now, because we have a fraction, there is a rule that we also have to follow. We must give the parameters so that the denominator cannot equal 0. Now, in this case, if I were to have 2 minus 0 in the denominator, or sorry, 2 minus 2, I know I would get 0. So I know that x must be greater than 2. So I have to put x greater than 2. All right, C. This is the notation that we have a lot of difficulty with. First thing I notice, it's f of g of x. I am not telling you to plug anything in. There are no numbers that have been given to you. So you should not pluck a number out of the hat and plug it in. You are going to take g and plug it into f. If this is confusing to you, go up to your problem. Circle g and say I'm going to plug it into f. So I know I'm going to get 6 times x squared minus 1. Well, I'm going to take and distribute that 6 so that I get an answer of 6 times x squared is 6. All right, something is really going on with part of my computer. My answer is 6x squared minus 6. And that's my final answer. Now, I'm giving you a value to plug in. You're going to find f of negative 1 first. So I'm going to say f of negative 1 is equal to 6 times negative 1, which gives me negative 6. Now, I'm going to take that negative 6 and I'm going to use it for g. So I have g of negative 6. I'm going to say negative 6 squared minus 1. Negative 6 times negative 6 is 36. Minus 1 gives us an answer of 35. I would put my answers in here, but for whatever reason, I'm having a difficult time writing my answers right here on this side of my screen. I don't know what's going on. I apologize. So now I'm going to do h of negative 4. So I find h. I know it's the square root. So h of negative 4 is equal to the square root of negative 4 minus 2. Well, I get the square root of negative 4 minus 2 is negative 6. Now, if we know anything about our square roots, we know that we cannot have a negative underneath our square root. We end up getting an irrational number, or we say that it is a non-real number, okay? So anytime you end up getting a negative underneath the square root, you cannot take the square root at all. We say that it is an irrational number. You will eventually learn to pull out the negative, but we're not there yet. Now, again, we're given h of 0, so we're going to take our 0 and we're going to plug it into h. So we get h of 0 first, which is equal to the square root of 0 minus 2. Well, 0 minus 2 is negative square root of negative 2. Well, we can't use that. So let's see, h of 0, and then we have to plug it into g. Actually, this might work out. All right, so we get a square root of negative 2. So then g of the square root of negative 2 is going to be the square root of negative 2 squared minus 1. Well, what happens is that square root squared, well, that cancels out, and I end up actually with a negative 2 minus 1, which gives me a negative 3. This one worked out. So I get an actual answer of negative 3. So even though I got an irrational number for h of 0, when I took it and plugged it into my g, well, it actually worked out so that that square root canceled out and I didn't have to worry about him anymore. Now, it says, using the functions from number 7, we want to talk about what is the domain. So, f minus g. Well, first I have to work it out. So, let's look at what f minus g is. So, f minus g. I didn't work it out up here, so I know I'm going to have to work it out. So I have 6x minus x squared minus 1. All right, so now I have to distribute that negative. So I get 6x minus x squared minus 1. So I get negative x squared plus 6x minus 1. Ooh, well, if I know anything about my graph, I can actually really quickly graph it based on what I have right here. Okay, I don't need to know anything else. I know I have a graph. Oops, make it smaller. I know that it is pointed down because of that negative in the front. And I know it's going to cross at negative 1. So I'm going to say this is negative 1. And I know it's facing down. So, for my domain, well, I know that from left to right, my endpoints are going off to infinity. So my domain ends up being negative infinity to positive infinity. Now, if I was going to do my range, I would say that it goes from negative infinity to negative 1. But we're not worried about the range. Now we have to look at f of g of x. Well, f of g of x, oh, I worked that problem out already. I got an answer of 6x squared minus 6. Write that 6x squared minus 6. And I know that it is, well, it's a parabola that faces up. Well, guess what? Parabola that faces up, actually it crosses at negative 6, so hold on. It goes way down here. Doesn't matter what it looks like. I just know that it's going to go from negative infinity to positive infinity. Now, I'm looking at c, h of x. I just want to know what the square root of x minus 2, what the domain looks like. Well, first of all, I have to remember, what does it look like? I know that the parent function is a square root. And I know that that minus 2 means that I'm actually shifting right 2. All right, this is what he looks like. And remember, I only care about left to right. It starts at 2. So the range starts at 2, and it goes off to positive infinity. All right, number 9. We want to take the inverse functions for each of the problems from number 7. So the original functions. So I'm going to rewrite them. So I have f of x equals 6x. I have g of x is x squared minus 1. And I'm going to work with h of x, square root of x minus 2. All right, so these are the functions that I'm utilizing. So inverse function. All right, very first step that we have to do is we have to switch the x and the y, and then we have to solve for y again. Okay, so I don't typically write f of x equals 6x. I'm going to actually use y equals 6x. Okay, so first things first, I have to switch guess I'll add a step. I have to change that f of x into a y, which I did. So then my next step, I'm going to switch my x and my y. And now I'm going to solve. So I'm going to divide by y on both sides. Or sorry, divide by 6 on both sides. Whoosh. My brain's not working, sorry. Divide by 6 on both sides so that I get x over 6 equals y. I'm sorry, something's going wrong with my pen. And at the very end, I must add my inverse, 1. All right, so I also have to make sure that I make it the inverse 1. Another way that you could see this written, right? We know that it's y inverse x over 6. But you could also, because the original function is an f of x, we know that this could be f inverse of x is equal to x over 6. So either one of these functions is the correct function notation. So now, our next one, we're going to look at g of x equals x squared minus 1. Well, again, I don't use g of x. I'm going to switch that to so that it is y equals x squared minus 1. All right, so the very first step that I'm going to do is I'm going to switch that y and that x so that I get x. What is going on? X equals y squared minus 1. Now I'm going to solve the function like I would any other time. So I'm going to do plus 1 on both sides. So I get x plus 1 is equal to y squared. Then I'm going to take the square root. If I take the square root of one side, I take the square root of the entire other side, so that I get an answer of the square root of x plus 1 is equal to the y inverse. Remember, at the very end, I just make sure that my y becomes a y to the power of negative 1, which means y inverse. And again, because I was doing g of x, I could also see it written as g inverse of x is equal to the square root of x plus 1. Either one of these is correct notation. But you need to know that you could see it as y inverse or g inverse. All right, and finally, we're looking at h of x. Again, instead of h of x, I'm going to put y equals the square root of x minus 2. My next step is to switch the x and the y. And now I'm going to start working the problem. First thing I have to do, First thing I have to do is square both sides. So we square both sides. Whatever we do to one side, we do to all of the other sides. So we have to put it in parentheses. So that we get x squared is now equal to y minus 2. To solve, I know I'm going to say plus 2, so that I end up getting x squared plus 2 is equal to my y. Remember, add that negative 1 at the top. And again, sometimes my notation will be h inverse of x is equal to x squared, not plus 1, plus 2. What is going on? Guys, I apologize. My computer just wants to be funny. Oh my goodness. All right. Done with question 9. Moving on to question 10 through 11 and lines.